Today, let's now start with the client libs topic. Okay, what is the purpose of client libs and all we will discuss today. Let's see how much we can cover that. So let me start with a simple example. Let's create some JavaScript files. Let me create like first.js. Okay, and here let me put some alert, like let me put some simple alert. Inside first.js. Okay, and let me just copy this, let me paste it. Okay, let me rename it to second.js. Of course, let me do it at 2. Sorry, 1, 2. Let's make it this was first. Let me rename it to 1. Okay. Inside 1. Okay, and inside 2. Now you can copy this and paste it over here. Now we created 3JS, 1, 2, and 3. We named it like this, and we put some alert inside all of these JS. Now let me go inside our sample word. Now to include your JS in your, or to call your JS inside your HTML, what do you do? How do you call that? See, ultimately a sitely file is also HTML only. So all the functionality of HTML you can do over here, plus some by using some attribute you can do some manipulation. Don't think if it's a sitely you cannot do anything which you were able to do in simple HTML. That is absolutely wrong. Everything that you do inside HTML can be done over here. Plus some sitely tags can be used. Okay. So it's basically the script tag that we use, script src, and then the path. So here, let me just copy this path and paste it over here. Similarly, okay, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, what I did is I just simply included these 3 JS. Now, if I refresh this, we'll see that these 3 JS will start coming up. You can see. So here, the first JS is loaded and the alert of that started coming up. Now the 3, and then we have the 2.js. Okay, all the 3 JS got loaded. So here, okay, all these 3 JS got loaded. So here, all the 3 JS are getting loaded. Now, consider a situation. Okay, now let me show you. If I do like here, if I'm in the preview, okay, and if I inspect this code, yeah. So if I go inside this div, okay, so you can see all the things are getting printed. And here you can see these three JS are also getting included. In the network calls also in the JS, you should see these three JS should get loaded over here. So let's see if these get loaded. 1, 2, and 3. So you can see 1, this is 1 JS, this is 2, and this is 3. All right. Now understand the real problem. This is legacy of way of working. The main issue with this is that in case multiple JS to be added into the component, then you would have to include each and every JS individually. And also there will be separate network call. You can see there is a network call for this 1.js and this 2.js, then there is a 3. So there is a separate network call for each and every JS that you include using the legacy way of working. Okay, so as many number of network call will cause the performance hit of your website. So as many number of network call, that much is the performance dip. If you have more network call, the performance will go down because it will cause slowness to your system. If less is the number of network calls, better is the performance, faster is the page load time. Now, if you have multiple JS, so you would have to include them multiple times. And also, you cannot think of putting all the code of multiple JS into a single JS because maybe some part of the code would have been has to be used in some other component, and some part of the code would has to be used in some other component. So if all the component, if we instead of creating separate JS, we start creating a single JS and all the components start including that whole JS, of course the page load will hamper a lot, page load time. Got my point? So to bring modularity and to have good performance, we have to create separate JS, and each JS or each CSS as well. It's not only with JS, but CSS as well has to serve its own purpose. JS and CSS, the major problem with the legacy system is that many JS or CSS, that much is the badness of the performance of the system. Okay. And also, see, if there are 10 JS or 10 CSS that is to be included, so there will be 10 lines of code, or 10 times individually you have to include those JS and then those CSS. Okay. So to overcome this problem or to provide a solution to this problem, to bring performance to your system so that there should be only one network call instead of multiple, even if there are multiple JS or CSS, what we make the use is client libs. So client libs is a concept that is being used which helps us in managing our JS and CSS in AEM. So JS and CSS are basically assets. We call them as assets because these are also the assets of your website. It defines the styling and all. Okay. So these JS and CSS are better managed in AEM with the help of client libs. So any question on client libs that come or you may be asked, then client libs helps us in managing our JS and CSS. Okay. Now, how will these JS and CSS will be better managed? Let's discuss now how we will create the client lib and how we will use the client libs. Okay. So client libs, if you see, there's already a client lib folder over here, but it doesn't matter any folder name client lib, it doesn't make it client lib. But as I told you, every node has a JCR primary type which defines the type of that node. So client lib J folder is also made up of a particular type of JSON primary type, that is CQ client library folder. Okay. So any folder whose JSON primary type is CQ client library folder, that folder becomes a client library, which within it can easily manage JS and CSS. Okay. Now if I've clicked over here the client lib, even if the folder name is client lib, it doesn't matter. Its primary type is simple empty folder. It's a simple folder. Okay. But if I click on this client lib base, here you can see the primary type is CQ client library folder. So this CQ client lib base is a client library folder, which is somewhere internally managing the JS and CSS. Okay. Okay. So first thing to remember, client libs in AEM are basically used to manage your and manage your JS and CSS in AEM. So JS and CSS in AEM are managed with the help of client lib. What purpose client libs serve? One of the purpose we already discussed that instead of having multiple network call, it will reduce the number of network calls. That we will see in a minute. Okay, we will just see in a minute how it will do. So it will better the performance. And also the second benefit of this is instead of directly keeping the JS and CSS open inside a component, we will place these JS and CSS not directly inside the component, but inside a client library folder. So better managing can be done. So what over here is they have created a client lib folder. How I get to know is by the JSON primary type. I will discuss about these properties. These are very important properties, these three. I will discuss. Let me firstly copy this client library folder and paste it over here. So here I pasted it. Just copy pasting, nothing else. So here I created a client. It doesn't matter the folder name. See the folder name. This is a client library. How we get to know is the type. But it doesn't matter whatever the name. I can rename it to like client lib, sample client lib, anything, sample minus client lib. That also you can do. It doesn't matter. Okay. So here, firstly, you have to give a name to your client lib. So this name that you give, sample minus client lib, it's a node name, but it's not client lib name. Okay. So client lib name has to be defined so that that client lib can further be used inside the code. Like here, these JS and CSS are being referred. Here JS has a name. Here JS has a name 1.js. So similarly, we have to give a name to our client lib, which can further be called inside your HTML or site lib. So how do we give a name to our client lib? Not by the node name, but it is by a property that is called as categories. So categories is a property that helps you giving a name to your client library. Like you have to give a name, like you have a name, I have a name. Similarly, to give a unique name to a client library, we use the property categories over here. And always see that this is a string array. That means it can have multiple names. Like we have, like everyone has some alias. At home, your parents may call you by different name, your friends may call you by different names. So similarly, here it's also can be called by different names. So let me give it a name as sample word dot minus sample word minus client lib. Okay, this is the name that I give. Sample word minus, or let's say dot, anything that you can use. Okay, so I said sample word dot client lib. Okay, let me remove this property for now. I will tell you about this later. And about this also, we will discuss. This is very important property, but we will discuss later. Now, what I'm going to do is these 1.js that instead of directly placing inside the component, what I'm going to do is I am dragging it, placing it inside the client folder. Yeah, in the same way the other two as well. So here I place my client library. Now, if you would see, I have all the 3JS plus, okay, let me remove this. Don't, okay, I will keep, let's keep it like. But there is one file that is js.txt and the other file that is css.txt. These are called as the remote control of your client library. So this is the client library and these are the remote control of your client library. Why do we call it as the remote control? Because these ultimately manages your client library. So basically, you included these 3JS, and in the same way, you can include multiple CSS as well in this client library. But whether these 3JS will be called and in which sequence will these be called, all these things depend upon the remote control that is js.txt. Similarly, always remember the name should always be js.txt. You cannot use like sample js.txt or sample my sample js.txt or my sample js.txt. Okay, and also it should be js.txt, and similarly it should be css.txt, which should be managing your css. Like if you have multiple css, like 1.css, 2.css, so for managing those, the remote control for those will be css.txt. So js.txt I'm discussing, let's discuss about js.txt, and this, all those scenarios goes with css as well. Okay, so in the js.txt, which is the remote control, what we do is we have to define which all JS will be loaded as part of this client library. It doesn't matter if your JS are there as part of this client library, till that time you do not give their names in the remote control, it doesn't matter. Even if these are there, it doesn't matter. You have to mention the name of those JS inside the remote control, that is js.txt. So here, let me say 3.js, then 1.js, then 2.js. Always remember what all JS that you want to include should be mentioned in this js.txt in a separate line, like in a first line, the first JS that you want to do. So here, by this way, I define the sequence as well as which all JS I wanted to know. Like let's say if I remove this in the end, I remove this 2.js, then it means I only want to load 2.js, that is 3.js and 1.js, and the sequence should be that firstly 3.js should be loaded and then 1.js should be loaded. Okay. Now let's discuss the. Now this is the remote control that we discussed. That is we define, that is js.txt. Sorry. That is js.txt, and this js.txt basically defines which all JS or which all, similarly css.txt define which all CSS and in which sequence they should be loaded. Okay, pretty important. Now next let's come to the next part, that is how will you load this JS or basically this client lib within your HTML. So this was our legacy code. Let me just comment this for now. Okay, I'm commenting this. Okay, and let me just grab. Just a minute, I need to, okay, not okay. Let me just copy the code for how would you include these client lib in your HTML. Just a minute. Let me grab that code. Where is my page? Yeah, over here. Maybe over here. Yeah. So let me just copy this code and let me paste it over here. It's the code to include a template. So if I show you over here again, see here, if you remember, we use this data slide use, then we give the over here, this is the HTML that we loaded. and then we use the data like call. Okay, so somewhere internally, this is, if you see, this is the lives path. So this code is always going to remain the same with some minor changes. So what AEM has done is they have created some template which helps you in loading your client libraries. Okay, so we basically have to use the template code to initiate our client libraries. So firstly, here we use the data like use. This is the variable name. This is just a simple variable name, and this is the HTML. Okay, where templates would have been defined. Okay, and then we use client lib. Here the client lib variable name and the client lib over here .js. If this is a template file, then what is this JS over here? This is the method name. See here, when we did, this was the variable and this was the method that we were calling, like sample method 2. Method was created inside the template. So if we go over here, you see sample method 2, sample method 1. That's what we were calling over here. That's what we are doing over here. So this is an out-of-box HTML file provided, which is basically a template file where multiple templates would have been defined. So one of them is this. To confirm this, what we can do is we can open this file and then we can see this. If I open this, with the client lib, and here you would see, you can see it's template. One method name is CSS. The other method name is JS. And the third, again a template, and whose name is all. So these are the three methods, or you can see, or you can say templates inside your client lib, and all have a parameter name categories. Okay. Now that's what we did. We called our HTML. We assigned it in a variable name. It doesn't matter with the variable name. Okay, I can make it as a sample, like SAM client. Okay, SAM client. This is just a variable name. So if this is the variable name, so the same variable name has to be used over here. Now, the main thing is here. This is the categories, is the parameter name, and the value will be the name of your client library. So what was the name of your client library? How do we define the name of the client library? By using the categories property. So here, this is the name. Let me just copy this. And let me just paste it. So what I'm saying is that I wanted to load this client library, but which remote control do I want it to call within this client library? Because this client library has two remote controls. One is css.txt, the other one is js.txt. Ultimately, when you have to switch on your TV, you have to use the remote control to initiate your television or anything. So which remote control do you want to call? Because in your home, you have your remote control for your air conditioner, for your TV. Which remote control you wanted to use is by the name of the template method. If you call the JS, then it will be the js.txt that will be called. If you, instead of using the JS, you call CSS, then it will be css.txt that will be called. And this third method, what's the name of third method? All. And in case if you will use all, then both JS and css.txt, js.txt and css.txt will get called. And if any of these txt file will be called, it will read the JS that has to be called and the sequence in which they have to be called. So sequence is also defined and which all JS has to be called. Similarly inside css.txt. Okay, so let me, for now, we are doing with JS, and the same is with CSS as well. So here we use the JS method, and the client name we provided over here. This is that you load the CSS at the top of the page and load the JS at the bottom of the page. So what you can do is you can load the CSS like this over here, sorry, and JS like this at the bottom of the page. Okay, since you can keep on loading your CSS, it will go to the remote control, that is css.txt, but css.txt has nothing but all commented out. Like I can remove this all. So nothing will happen by this code. Because our remote control css.txt that will be called, it's totally empty. But our remote control, this JS, when this JS, with this JS, the JS.txt remote control will be called. It will further define the sequence and which all JS should be loaded. Okay. Let me refresh the page and let me show it to you if our JS gets loaded or not. Yeah, you can see inside 3.js, then inside 1.js, and then the page loaded. Because we said firstly the 3.js should be loaded, then the 1.js. If you say, oh, firstly it is the 2.js that has to be loaded. So 2.js. And now if I again refresh my page, so firstly 2.js will be loaded, then 3, then 1. Okay. So, okay. Now, so one of the benefit is that you can easily see how easily I am able to manage my client lib. So whenever any developer will come, okay, he will be able to see that, okay, this is the folder, this is the client library folder. Okay, because it has a JS primary type of CQ client library. And so within this only my JS and CSS will be placed, not parallel to, or there is no mix and match of like HTML and JS and CSS. Otherwise, it will become very difficult to find. Okay, manage the things. The second important thing is we have the remote controls. Since we have the remote controls, here we can define which all JS should be loaded or which all CSS should be loaded and in which sequence. Now consider a situation that one of your JS has to be removed from code. Maybe like there's still like maybe a chances that it should not be removed, but yes, it has to be removed. Like for now, but still the decision has to be made. Now, instead of deleting the complete JS from your code, what you can do is you can just remove it from your remote control. Okay, like if 1.js has to be removed, but we are still not sure, you can keep the JS as it is, just update the remote control, that is js.txt. Further, if the decision is being made that okay, you have to keep it, oh, then you can just update the js.txt. Okay. The third of the most important is not the most, but there is another most. See how easily I am able to load my JS. Now you consider if you have 10 JS and you were using this legacy way, then you have to write the same code how many times? 10 times, because 10 times the JS has to be loaded. But now here I have to write these 3 lines, or even these 3 lines I can reduce it to 2 lines. This ending and starting can be combined. Means simple. It's made very simple. Here I'm loading this JS, so js.txt. Further inside the js.txt, I can decide which all JS and CSS should be loaded. Now, the most important benefit, if I see which all of my JS and CSS are loading, if I go to my page, earlier I was seeing how many network calls, since there were 3 JS that were loaded, so there were network calls. Let's now see how many JS are now getting loaded. So here, if you would see, oh, you can see there is only 1 JS that is getting loaded. So you can see etc.clientlib sample this. even if I have these 3JS and also in the remote control, I have mentioned these 3JS, but still there is only one JS that is getting loaded. And also in the network call, if you would see, you can see.
Okay.
And also if you see the response of this, you can see it contains the combined code of all the 3JS. Okay, now if I load it inside a new tab, open a new tab, you see it has the code of all the 3JS. If I say that I do not want to load this 3.js, okay? And now if I refresh this JS, you can see it now has the code of those 2JS only. If I change the sequence, let's say, let me change the sequence. Let me just change the sequence like this. Okay. And you can see the sequence get changed inside this. So this is the most important benefit, that instead of having multiple network calls, you are now having only single network call. One is for JS and the other is for CSS. In the same way, if I go to the CSS tab, you would see, or if I inspect it over here, see, this is the CSS. This is the network call or the include for CSS. If I open this, it will be empty. There will be no code inside this. Yes, because the remote control of this is css.txt is empty. But there is only one network call. Instead of having multiple network call, it's having only one network call. So that is the major performance improvement. Ultimately, see, what we wanted to do is that instead of having multiple JS, if we can combine the code of those multiple JS into a single JS so that there will be one network call. That's what we wanted. But if we did that, or if we do that, that will not bring modularity. Okay, because all the code is combined to one, then it becomes very difficult to debug the code, and modularity is not a thing. So from working perspective, all the JS are different, but behind the scene, it basically combines the code. Okay, so that's the main use case of this. Okay, one important thing, if you see, I want you to observe this. See this. Sorry, see this, and now see this. What difference do you see? Like anything you observed. See, here the URL or the place where the client lib is created is apps sample component everything. But here it's etc.clientlib sample component. All the things, this thing is all same. I agree.
Yeah.
But why is this different? etc.clientlibs. It should be apps. Because we created inside apps. Why is it loading like this? So till 6.3, all these client libs were created inside the etc hierarchy. But after 6.3, Adobe said that you move all your custom code from every other place, including etc, to apps. So our custom code, our all who buy AEM, all our custom code should be placed only inside apps. So apps is the only location where we can store our code. But I agree that client libs were earlier created inside etc and now inside apps. But why still are they loading like this etc.clientlib? Why are they not loading inside directly inside apps? Now this is the question to be think upon. Okay, why not apps? Why still using etc, and why is this etc.clientlib? Like, why is it so? Now it's not about out of box. It's all custom, like our code. Apps is our code. Why if I put apps over here, why why my code, see, okay, let me duplicate this, and let me put apps over here. Even now, you can see now even this JS is getting loaded.
Yeah.
So even if I use this path, then also this thing is getting loaded. So why my code internally is using this path to load the JS and to load the TXT? Sorry, to load the JS and CSS. Why not /apps sample component? Why not like this? I tell you the reason. So the reason behind this is that apps is a place where our code is being stored. Okay? On publisher instance, now listen very carefully. On publisher instance, end user who hits our website does not have an access to apps hierarchy, because apps is a place where our custom code is being stored. So end user neither has an access to apps, neither has an access to libs, neither homes, like except content, conf and etc. End user does not has any read writes on any other folder, except, again I'm saying, except particular folder. What we do is we give specific write, not every write, and we only give read writes to the end user. So the end users are only being given read writes on content folder, conf folder, and folder. Conf, content, and etc. Don't get confused. Now your question should be, how would we get to know that, okay, this is an end user? How does an AEM get to know that it is an end user and someone is not an end user? Like someone is, how do we get to know that if a user is landing on our website, then it should have the read writes on these three folders. Like if that it's an end user. I will answer this question. This question should have come from your side. But end user only have read writes on these three folders. And there are no writes being given on apps folder. Neither reads, of course, not at all right. Write, modify, delete operation cannot be given to the end user. So that is why, since inside apps they do not have the read writes, that is why what we do is we on our client libs add this property that is allow proxy true. By using this property, what AEM does is that it loads our client lib through a proxy, and that proxy is this etc.clientlib, so that the JS and CSS should start loading for the end user. Okay? If I remove this property, like see, if I remove this property, let me just delete this. But what it will do is it will start loading from apps. If I do not put this allow proxy true. If I do not put this allow proxy true, I deleted this, it will start, it is, you can see it is still loading, but now it will load from apps. Since I am on my author instance and here I am logged in as an administrator user, and admin user has every right to every folder, that is why you can see it's now loaded as /apps, now not using the proxy. Okay, so that's why we have to use this property on our publisher instance. On publisher, it's the end user who lands. Now, how do we get to know that it's an end user? This is the question. How does AEM get to know that it's an end user? Okay. Now let's find an answer to this. firstly, are we clear with this allow proxy true? So it's provide us a proxy for us a way to load our client libs, not from inside as, but from inside etc folder. Because end user has read writes on etc, conf and content. So we through backdoor we load it through etc hierarchy. Now let me tell you about the end user. When end user lands on our website, by default AEM has a user which is called as anonymous user. Always remember anonymous user. So any end user who lands on our website by default gets the rights of anonymous user. Okay, so this is internal implementation of. So if you see, every AEM instance would by default has this anonymous user, and it does not has any permissions. You can see it would only have limited permission. Like you can see on some CQ tag, it only has read permission. Similarly, it has read permissions over here. If I scroll down, it would have some read permission. If it does not has the read permission on your code, then you have to assign it like this. Just read permission. If you accidentally give this anonymous user every right, like all the rights, like if you give all the rights to anonymous user and that on publisher instance, you mean that you are very much, your website is very much vulnerable to malicious users or to attack. Okay, so anonymous user is an end user and it should not have any right except just read rights on some of the nodes. This is very important concept and very important interview question. Sometimes interviewers take more into this and they try to make you like know that if you have the complete context of this concept or not. This is a very important concept, allow proxy tree. Yeah, proxy is that if you want to make, if you are making a request to some party or some party API, then instead of going through a direct way, you can go through this proxy. Through that proxy, means that thing is accessible like that. It's like a backdoor sort of thing. Backdoor. To get the thing done, you use a backdoor sort of thing. So let's move to the other concept. Other thing inside the this client lib. So we have one client library created over here. Let's consider that your search component, this is my search any component, and this also has some client library. Like let me just paste it over here. Okay, so this was sample. Let me rename it to search. Okay, now let me just give it some property names and all. Okay, so this was sample word. Let me use it as search.client. Okay, so I give it a name, search.client. And it also has this, let me remove this css.txt. So similar like we have js.txt, similarly we can, similar way css.txt. Now here it has some more JS, like let me rename it to 4.js and 5.js. Okay, 4.js and let me rename it to 5.js. Okay, and let's delete this. I don't know. So here inside the js.txt, this is the remote control for this. And let me say, firstly, 4.js would be loaded, and then with JS 5. Okay, so this is my another client lib that is ready. What I did is I named it as search.clientlib, and I have this remote control which says firstly the 4.js should be loaded and then the 5.js. So both these JS should be loaded. Okay. Now consider a scenario that this client lib was already there and you created your this client library. Okay. Now while you were creating this client library, you realize that this 4 and 5.js is also needed in this client library. It means like this 4 and 5.js, although were created previously, but somehow the code is there inside these both of these this JS, which is a part of this client library, is needed in this client library or inside these JS as well, or maybe is required as part of this component, sample word component as well. Okay. Now, one solution is that you can paste these two JS inside this client library as well and update the js.txt, but that is duplicacy of code. So the best solution for this is, other solution is that within this sample word, like you are loading this, so like you are loading this, you can load this as well. Like here you can write search as well. Of course, here you are loading sample word. In the same way you can load search client lib as well. Am I right? Like the name of this is search.clientlib. So this way you can load, firstly you can load the search.clientlib and then you can load the one that you were already loading. That will also do the thing. But why to write the code when AEM provides a simple property? So if this is the client library and this client library needs to have the code of these JS or this client library as well. So what we can use is property embed, then string, and this is what is the name of this client library? It's not search hyphen, it's search dot, because this is the, okay, so I will go over here and will write search dot client lib. Okay. And also a client library can embed the code of multiple client library. So I have this client library and this sample client library. So sample client library embedded the code. Here I use the embed. It means it embedded the code of my search.client library. It's a multi-array string array, so it can embed the code of multiple client libs. So now what will happen is, since we embed the code of the search client library, so all the code of this client library and this client library will be merged into a single JS file and single CSS file. Okay, so the code will be merged. So if I refresh now the sample client library, first, as of now, these two are loaded. Now, if I refresh this, you can see, okay, I think I missed to update the code of these two. So it was this 5. So let me name it as 5. And it was 4. Let me name it as 4. Okay. Now, if I refresh this sample client library, you would see firstly 4, then 5, then 1, then 2. Because inside over here, I just loaded 1, 2. If you want to load, you can load 3.js. And you go over here and you refresh it, you can see. So all the code from this sample as well as this search gets embedded into a single client library, that is this sample client library. If I show you over here, let me just refresh it. Okay, so firstly 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. If I go over here, And if I open this, so you can see, so only one, this sample client left. There is no search client left. If you want to see the code of search client left, that's also there. So what was the name of the component? It's search and then search minus client left. So search and then again search. So to individually load this search client library, we have 4 and 5 getting loaded. But here in this sample client library, not only the code of this sample one is getting loaded, but the code of search client library is also loading, because we embedded the code of search client library into our sample client library. So the code gets merged. This is embed. Now there is another third and the last property in this client lib concept, that is dependencies. And again, I will use the same property, search dot okay, and let me remove this embed property for now. So what I said is, embed was, it embeds the code. It basically merges the code. Okay. But dependencies is, as the name indicates, it says that our sample client library is dependent on the code of search client library. So search client library is the dependent one, and our sample client library basically depends upon the code of this. So if my code is dependent on your code, then of course your code should be executed, then only my code will execute. I depend on you, then you will work, then only seeing your thing I will work. So for that sort of purpose, we use the dependent client library. So here we do not want to, when you do not want to embed the code, but you want the dependencies where the code of the dependent client library should be loaded first, and then you use the dependency. And here in this case, there won't be single network call because the code is not embedded, but there will be two different network calls. Firstly, it will be for search client library, and then it will be for sample client library. If I refresh this page now, you will see instead of a single client network call, there will be two network calls because we use dependencies. So firstly, your code, that is search one, will be loaded, and then my code. So this is the purpose of dependencies. We discussed about allow proxy, very much important categories. We know you have to give a name to your client library. Without this categories property, client library won't work. You need to have at least one name. Okay, you can have multiple names. Your parents can call you a different name. Your friends can call you, but you need to have one name. So categories gives a name to a client library. It doesn't matter whatever is the name of the node. It should be a secret client library folder. But yeah. Now I give you two things. One and the most important. You can ignore this categories because this is not important. This is string array. This is by default of working of AEM. They made it like this, so that you can create alias of your client libraries or give different names. So this is not important. You do not need, like, there is no any reason behind this string array. Don't worry about this. What you should search is in AEM in client libraries. What is what embed versus dependencies in client libraries? When should you use embed and when should you use dependencies? So these two are changed interrelatably, and you need to know the proper, like, more differences between the two. We discussed the main core concept behind the two, but there are few more things that I'm leaving on to you to go more deep into and dig out more. Okay. I told you and I showed you the main differences, when would you use it, now you know. But still there are few more things for you to explore that you will go and find out. So we covered our client lips topic. This embed versus dependency, you have to search and we can so like we have gs.txt, in same way we use gcss.txt, and always remember, like if you create a.css, b.css, that you have to mention inside your css.txt, and it should be in separate line like this way. Also, one last thing, you can create a folder also over here, like a JS folder. So here I created a JS folder, simple folder, and you can even place your JS over here inside this. Like that way. I place my JS over here. Inside the js.txt, then you have to tell the base folder, and it will be like base equal to the folder name. Okay. I just need to confirm whether it's like this only. Yes, let me just check it by loading over here only. So let me remove this dependency for now. And if you place your JS or CSS inside this hash, you have to use this and the folder name. Let me just refresh my page and let's see my sample client lib loads or not. Means alerts comes or not. Yeah, alerts are coming. Very good.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you want to more modularize it, then you have to use hash base and then the folder name where you are exactly placing it.